Hi there and welcome back to another NJS instructional video. In this video we'll be showing you how to cook a sensational pork loin roast with a super crunchy crackle on the Kamado Joe using an EspetoSul Rotisserie. Now we are almost ready to take this pork loin roast off, but first let's go back 3 days to where it all started in the kitchen. Now we have here a really nice piece of boneless pork loin roast. And this is just under 2.1 kilos or around that 4.5 pounds. Now this is from Coles, and I have found that the quality of Coles's pork generally is exceptional, and it tends to be female pork. So it doesn't have that typical smell associated with pork. Now we're going to remove the pork out of the packet, give it a rinse under cold tap water, and then give it a pat dry with some paper towels. Now that we've washed our pork loin roast, and this is a really nice cut of meat, the next step we're going to do is puncture the skin using this device, which as we go along, we'll start putting little bubbles into that skin. Now we're not going to score the skin. I do find I get mixed results when I do score the skin, especially on the rotisserie. And that I believe is because as the fat renders down, it starts cooling the skin and actually stops that crackle from forming. Now it's very hard to see on camera and even with the eye. However, that has put little pricks on the surface of the skin. So not too deep, but enough to allow air to escape and also help us form some really good crackle on the rotisserie. And actually, as you can see, it has slightly been scored, probably from the butcher just before they wrapped it. However, it's not too bad and it shouldn't hamper too much on the crackle. So our next step is to turn it over, and we will start dry rubbing. Now for our dry rub mixture, I'm just going to sprinkle some table salt all around the meat. Then I'll add a layer of Lane's Magic Dust, and then finally finish it off with some fennel seeds. Now don't worry too much if you get some on the skin, we'll clean that up after. Now this is optional, we don't need to do this, and I have had great results with leaving the pork as is and just skewering it on the rotisserie. However, to keep the meat a little bit more juicier and a bit more flavorful, we will wrap it up in butcher's twine as much as we can, and that'll help hold the moisture together. It will add a little bit to our cook time. So here we're creating what's called a butcher's knot, which is also known as a slip knot. And this will help pull the meat together really nicely. And then we'll secure that knot with what's called a security knot as well. So now that our pork is nice and wrapped with butcher's twine, we're just going to place it on a bread rack and on a tray like this. And this will allow it to aerate as we put it in the fridge. Now we will give the skin a final wipe down just to take off any moisture, because we do want that skin to dry out in the refrigerator over these next few days. So just using some paper towels, just give that a bit of a wipe. Now about half an hour before our cook on Saturday, we will coat the skin with a good layer of salt. to help dry it out further and give it a nice taste before we put it on our Kamado. So for now, let's go place this in the fridge. So we've just taken our pork loin roast out of the refrigerator, and we will season the skin with a bit of salt. Now that'll help extract a lot of the water and moisture out of the skin. And just before we put it on the Kamado, we will give it a pat dry with some paper towels. We'll then rub some olive oil around the skin and again put a whole heap of table salt all over the skin. And that'll give us a really nice taste and crackling as it's cooking. So we'll just put this aside and start prepping our Kamado. As we'll be using the EspetoSul Rotisserie, we won't be needing any of the grill or heat deflector plates. Now we can remove this rack, however I'll just rotate it 45 degrees and that way we have a nice clear path for our skewer. And we won't be needing this side shelf either. We'll clean out the old charcoal and we'll place some fresh charcoal in. And as you can see, I've pushed all the charcoal to the back of the Kamado and left nothing here at the front. So our rotisserie will go a little bit more towards the front, and that way we don't have direct heat underneath the rotisserie, or our pork in this case, and we won't get any flare-ups, and we won't have that skin burning too early either. We'll grab our EspetoSul bracket, place it there, and also the other side for the rotisserie. Now we're just going to adjust our fork over here so that it sits approximately halfway in our Kamado, like that. So let's fire up our charcoal using this Looft Lighter. Now that we have our charcoal lit, I'm just going to place that piece over there so it catches. Now we will close the lid of the Kamado, so we'll just remove these pieces here temporarily. That'll allow our Kamado to get a bit of heat soak in it as well. And we will open up the top vent and the bottom vents fully. Now whilst our Kamado is getting up to temperature, we're about 5 minutes away from our cook. We will place on top of the lump charcoal some apple smoking chunk wood, just to give it a nice sweet flavour throughout our pork. So now that the skin has been sweating, I'm just going to give it a dry with some paper towels and dry up all that moisture that's coming out. It doesn't have to be perfect, which is fine. Like that. Now we're just going to grab some olive oil. We're going to put it all over the skin, and again we're going to season that with a whole heap of salt. I'm just using my fingers, just rub it all into that skin, and this will act like a binder for our salt. So whilst our meat is turning on the rotisserie, the salt will stay on the skin. I'm just going to pat that in. As you can see, we put a fair bit of salt, which is fine. Like that. Now we'll grab our skewer and put it through the pork and centralise it as such, and then we'll put it on the Kamado. Perfect. So now we're ready to put this on the Kamado. Now we anticipate this cook will take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half until we reach the desired internal temperature of our pork. And we're also going to close the top vent fully and leave the bottom vent open just a little bit. And if you'd like to know more about how I set up my EspetoSul Rotisserie for my Kamado Joe, be sure to check out the link above where I go through it in my chicken gyros video in a great amount of detail. Now after about an hour, we will check the internal temperature of our pork, and we know it's done when it's around that 63 to 65 degrees Celsius, or around that 145 to 150 degree Fahrenheit mark. Now don't worry too much about the temperature of our Kamado. We do have our lid open, but we still get that nice oven effect of the Kamado. It will hover between 150 to 200 degrees Celsius, maybe a little bit more, depending on the charcoal and where it's at in its burn. So we are now just shy of the 1 hour mark, so let's see how our pork loin rotisserie is faring. And that is looking superb, and our crackling is forming really, really nicely. So let's start checking the internal temperature of our pork. (32 degrees Celsius there. 42. 48. So we still have a little bit to go. So we'll let that cook for another half an hour. So it's almost been 1.5 hours. So let's check out our pork loin roast. And that crackle is looking amazing. So we'll do an internal temp check. 50, 51, 60. We're almost there. 52, 63. 66. So we'll give it another 10 minutes and then we'll check the internal temperature again, and hopefully we can take it off and start serving. Now it's been 1 hour and 40 minutes in total, and we are ready to take this pork loin roast off. Now we'll let our pork sit for about 10 to 15 minutes before we start carving it up. I'm just going to remove the skewer. Now it's been about 10 to 15 minutes and we're ready to start carving up this pork. And that is super crunchy. Let's have a look at that. Some really good crackle, and that is perfectly cooked. Let's cut a few more pieces. Let's have a bit of a bite into it. It is so good. Now, as a recap, our pork loin roast took 1 hour and 40 minutes to cook on the rotisserie. We let it rest for about 10 minutes. We had a really nice result with our crackle. The pork is cooked really well. and I think a lot of that has to do with the preparation. So we did start 3 nights before preparing the skin and also the dry rub to get a really nice tasting and looking pork and crackle. Now we're going to fast forward to tomorrow where we do a post-cook review and then come back to today. So now it's the day after our pork rotisserie cook, so let's complete a post-cook review. Starting off, let's have a look at the Kamado. Now you can see that we use most of the charcoal here. There is still a few fairly medium-sized pieces remaining, and the rest is mostly ash. So this shows me that the charcoal we had was more than sufficient for our cook. And we'll just check out our ash drawer. So you can see that the charcoal is burnt quite well, and we just have that powdery ash left. Now the end result of our pork loin roast cook was a really succulent, juicy meat with some really incredible crackle, and it was definitely a hit with the family. So that's it for our post-cook review. Now I hope you found this video informative. Don't forget to like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit that bell notification icon. Thanks for watching.